Hi there, so today we're looking at 14.2 cumulative frequency. So the objectives for this lesson then, to understand how cumulative frequency is calculated, to be able to plot cumulative frequency diagrams, to be able to calculate the median and interquartile range from a cumulative frequency curve. Before we start, we need to just check our prior knowledge. So to be able to complete this lesson, we need to be able to read information from a grouped frequency table. So understand the group notation. So 10 less than x or less than or equal to 20 tells us that x has got to be greater than 10 but less than or equal to 20. We also need to be able to ensure we can draw a single quadrant axis based on data from a table. So making sure the axis goes along in equal steps and are labelled correctly. Should also be able to plot values on a single quadrant graph, making sure they're accurate from our table of values. Be able to find a quarter, a half and 3/4 of any value. So I've given some examples there of how to do that. And to be able to convert fractions to percentages. So if we have our fraction multiplied by 100, we get our percentage. Check you're happy with that before you move on. If not, you may need to stop this video and go back and look at that before you start. Okay, so we're going to have a look then at cumulative frequency. So cumulative meaning one after another and frequency meaning how many. So cumulative frequency is a running total and we find it by adding the frequencies together. So we've got a table of 100 people holding their breath. So the first group is from 30 to 35 seconds, so including 35, and there are 9 people. Our second group from 35 up to 40 seconds is 12 people. Now the cumulative frequency is each of those times from 30 seconds up to the maximum time for that group. So our first cumulative frequency is 9. The next one we now want, instead of from 35 to 40 seconds, we want from 30 to 40 seconds. We want to know everybody up to that point. So we need to add the 9 and the 12 together, which gives us 21. If we want to know everyone up to 45 seconds, we need to add on an extra 24, so we get 45. And we continue to add the frequencies to our last total as we go. Now it's important when we get to the end that we check our last value. We have a value of 100 here, and the total frequencies of all of our people is also 100. Those numbers should match. If they don't, then you've made a mistake with your cumulative frequency and will need to go back and check that again before you move on. So once we have our cumulative frequencies, we can plot them into a graph. Cumulative frequency is always on the vertical axis, starting at 0, and in this case, our maximum value is 100. And the other variable, this time in seconds, goes along the horizontal axis. And you'll notice that I haven't needed to start at 0. If I started at 0, I would just end up with a big gap at the beginning of my graph. So I've started at the lowest value from my table, which was 30. The values in my table went up in equal groups of 5, so I've gone along in equal groups of 5. If you have a table that's going along in uneven groups, then you will still need to make sure your axis goes along in equal groups. Once we've got our graph set up, then we're going to plot the values from our table, and we plot them to the upper boundary for each group. So remember, our first group was 30 to 35, so we plotted at 35. Our second group, because we added the frequency together, was 30 to 40, so we're plotting at 40. Once we've plotted all of our points accurately, we're going to join them with a smooth curve. Now it needs to be a smooth curve. Don't be tempted to use a ruler and draw line segments. It will take a bit of practice, but you will get there with those smooth curves. You'll also notice that I've joined the last point down to 0. Now in some textbooks and worksheets, you'll find that they stop at the last point. Personally, I like to join them down to 0 just to finish the graph, so that is up to you. Now we've got a graph, then we can use that to find some values. So we're going to start off by finding the median being the middle person. Now we had 100 people, so half of 100 is 50. So we're going to go across at 50 until we reach the curve, then down to take our reading from our horizontal axis. So again, don't forget to check the scale. From 45 to 50, I have 10 squares. So that means 1 is every 2 squares along. So 45 and then 1 gives me 46. So be aware of the scale of your axes. As well as the median, we can find the range. Now, range, remember, is a measure of spread. What we often want to find is something called the interquartile range. The interquartile range means that we're getting rid of any outliers. So outliers, remember, are people who don't conform to the norms of that group. So we might have had one person who could hold their breath much, much longer than everybody else, or one person who could only hold their breath for quite a short time. So to get rid of those people at each end, we find something called the interquartile range. The interquartile range focuses on that middle 50% of the population. To be able to find that, we need to find the lower quartile. The lower quartile is a quarter of a way along the list, so it's the total frequency divided by 4. And we need the upper quartile. The upper quartile is 3/4 along the list, so the total frequency divided by 4 and multiplied by 3. The interquartile range then is the upper quartile minus the lower quartile, so that will give us that middle 50%. You may want to pause the video now just to read through that again and make a note of that formula. Okay, let's have a look then at how we use our graph to find that interquartile range. So first of all, we need to find the lower quartile. So we have 100 people, a quarter of 100 is 25. So we're going to draw a line across at 25 and then down to find the time. So the time there is 41 seconds. The upper quartile then is 3/4 of 100, which is the 75th person. And the 75th person held their breath for 50.5 seconds. So the interquartile range, 50.5 minus 41, is 9.5 seconds. So that's telling us for that middle 50% of the group that the difference between the shortest and longest time they could hold their breath was 9.5 seconds. As well as finding the median and interquartile range, we could be asked to estimate other values from our cumulative frequency graph. So how many people completed the race in less than 38 seconds? So this time we're reading from our horizontal axis. So we're going to go across till we get to 38 and then up to the curve and across, and that gives us a reading of 16 people. Or we might be asked how many people took more than 52 seconds to complete the race. So 52 seconds then. We go up from 52 and across. Now you can see there that it says 80, but it's not 80 people who could hold their breath for more than 52 seconds. That would be less than. So we want to look at the people who held it for longer than 52 seconds. So that's above the line. So from 80 up to our maximum, which was 100 people, there is a difference of 20 people. So it's important to note, if we want less than, then we're taking the reading from our line, so below the line. If we want more than, we need to find the reading above the line. Make sure you're happy with that before you move on. Okay, so your turn then. So we've got a table of values here for the marks scored by 100 people in a test. You need to copy and complete the table, filling in the cumulative frequencies. Draw a cumulative frequency curve on appropriate axes. Estimate the median and the interquartile range from your graph. And the pass mark for the test was 68 marks. What percentage of students passed the test? Pause the video now and have a go at that in your maths book. Okay, let's have a look at the solutions then. So firstly, the cumulative frequencies should read 4, 10, 22, 42, 67, 89, 96 and 100. We then need to plot them on appropriate axes. So cumulative frequency on the vertical axis from 0 to 100 and marks scored along the horizontal axis, and I've gone from 20 to 100 in steps of 10. So you may have a slightly different layout for your graph. You may have used slightly different paper. that's okay. We should still get similar readings. So we're going to plot our values then, remember plotting to the maximum of the group and joining them with a smooth curve. Okay, so we're first asked to find the median. So we had 100 people, half of 100 is 50, so we're going to go across at 50 and down to take our reading of 63. Now it is important that you show on your graph where you're drawing these lines. So rather than just imaginarily following along and down, draw them onto your graph with a pencil so that anybody checking your answer can see where your answer has come from. Now I've got 63. Obviously, because you're drawing this curve freehand, your curve may be slightly different. So with these, the examiners will accept a range of marks. So let's suggest anything between 61 and 65 would be appropriate. So for today, let's say that you need to be within 2 either side of my answer. Okay, we were then asked to find the interquartile range. So firstly, the lower quartile. 100 divided by 4 is 25, so we're going to find the 25th person. So we go again across and down, and that gives us 52 marks. The upper quartile, 3/4 of 100, would be the 75th person. So across and down, that gives us 73 marks. So our interquartile range is 73 minus 52, which is 21 marks. Finally then, we were told the pass mark is 68 and asked to find the percentage of students who passed. So this time we're going along to 68 on the horizontal axis and up till we reach the curve and across. And we can see there we've got an answer of 63. Now remember, to pass the test, they needed more than 68. So more than is above the line. So from 63 up to 100. So 100 minus 63 was 47. So there were 47 people. We were asked to give it as a percentage. So we had 100 people in total. So 47 out of 100 is our fraction. Multiplying it by 100 to change from fraction to percentage means 47% of the students passed the test. Okay, well, thank you for working through this lesson with me today. Please click on the link to move on to the next lesson when you're ready.